right, listen up.
All right, everybody, welcome back to the 440th VFW Podcast. We had such a good reception from our first podcast that we decided to go ahead and record some more. We'll see how long we keep this going. Certainly we enjoyed it. This is actually the second one that we're recording. I don't know whether we'll publish them in that order. But in any event, my name is Tyrant, and with me again tonight is Zeus. Say hello, Zeus.
Hello, Zeus.
Yeah, okay. Yep, that's good. That's good.
We'll
keep that. No, we'll keep that joke alive. It's a good one. Nothing like jokes just get better every time you tell them, right?
Right.
So we are the 440th Virtual Fighter Wing. If you heard our first episode, you know that we are a group of like-minded individuals who are flying Falcon BMS. We are definitely interested in more people joining us. But we talked a bit about on that first episode, the Hello World episode, about why you might want to join. I thought tonight maybe what we would do is talk a bit more about other areas. And in particular, the thing I thought that Zeus, he has a lot of good experience on is mission building. I've done a little bit of it myself, but not quite as much as he has. But I know that missions are sort of the heart of what we do, right? Like the whole point of a virtual fighter wing is to get together and fly missions. And so I thought we would talk a bit about, what we like to see go into them. Maybe, I don't know, just whatever comes up, really. This is all just a conversation. We were joking before the podcast that, Zeus and I are like, well, we could just really turn a mic on anytime that we're together and talk in BMS, and it'd be, I think something people will listen to. Hopefully tonight will be no exception. But in any event, let's go ahead and jump in. So Zeus, I know I kind of gave you a little bit of forewarning about this, that we were going to talk about mission building. So I'm sure you have some thoughts. I don't really have like a checklist in front of me or anything like that. So maybe I'll just throw it to you and you can share with us whatever you've got in mind, and then we can kind of take it from there.
That sounds great. By all means, jump in anytime. Certainly when the topic of mission building came up, a couple of ideas jumped into my mind right away. But before I hop into those, Tyrant is doing himself a disservice by saying he doesn't spend a lot of time doing mission building, because some of the work that he's done building his virtual mission tools application have really made the job of mission building a lot easier. So if you haven't checked that out, Tyrant, you've got that there's a post over on the BMS forum. Of course, you can find more information about it on our website as well, but I don't know if there's anything you want to plug if you've got a URL handy, but if not, maybe that's something you can overlay when we post the podcast.
I'll definitely put a link in the notes, assuming I remember, but hopefully I will. But there is a kind of a reasonably easy link to remember, which is it's bit.ly, so bit.ly with a dot before the L / Tyrants VMT. That's virtual mission tools. That'll take you to the kind of the download page. It's not a very descriptive page. It's just sort of like a changelog, but it's kind of the easiest one to remember. But like I say, I'll throw a link in the bottom there, and we might talk a bit more about VMT this time. I don't know if we'll get to it. We can maybe talk about it some other time.
It'll come up eventually.
Okay,
yep.
Right, cool. So anyway, I didn't mean to interrupt you there. Go ahead.
No, that's great. I just wanted to point that out, that even though you may not be an avid mission builder, there's some great tools out there that help you accomplish your goals, whatever they may be. Specifically for the 440th, and I guess I'll speak probably more to me, but I think this is one of the things that brings us together at the 440th is the types of missions that we're looking to build tend to be those that really emphasize a cooperative mission, that we're banding together to get something done, whether that be a very elaborate, highly detailed and planned strike mission, or maybe it's simply practicing a particular skill that tends to be a perishable one, whether that's air-to-air refueling or FAC procedures or things like that. We don't do a lot of mission building that has or that results in certainly not PvP type dogfighting kinds of things. It's typically more of a cooperative, trying to accomplish a goal type mission. And I think there's a variety of people within the wing that go ahead and produce missions, and whether they be campaigns or based off of one of the dynamic campaigns and modified, or if it's a specifically built tactical engagement that we do. But they're a lot of fun to fly, and for those of you that haven't tried doing this, I definitely encourage you to try it. You can start off fairly simple, and there's some tips and tricks that we may get into in this or later podcasts. Certainly at the 440th, we have a section of our forum site that covers some of the mission building tips and tricks, and we can provide some technical assistance there as well. From my perspective, the types of missions, as I said, that I like to build are those that generally take anywhere from, well, I suppose simple missions, maybe as small as 4 or 6 seats in them. Other missions may scale all the way up to 20 plus seats in order to successfully fly and execute with any reasonable chance of success this particular mission. And try to incorporate certainly multiple flights, in many cases multiple packages, and try to emphasize one or a small handful of skills that we're looking to really leverage. For example, a particular mission may require low-level flying and precise navigation and timing to avoid enemy SAM sites or cap coverage, things like that, or just in general strike timing. You don't want to have a low-level strike team flying over your target at the precise moment that the weapons from your high-altitude strike flight have dropped. That can lead to ugly, nasty things. We've actually had a few of those.
Yeah.
But in general, while they look cool on a video debrief, they can lead to nasty things. So, in that case, it might be really the emphasis on timing and coordination of strike efforts. Others are more of a situational awareness and decision making type mission, where the mission maker's secret goal is to get the flight and the package into a situation that may not ultimately end up playing out as originally briefed, and see what happens. See if the flight leads or others detect that, hey, this is not what we expected. We were told, light AAA and no enemy air activity, and suddenly I'm seeing puffs of flak all around me, and I'm hearing AWACS call bandits from every point in the sky. Maybe we need to reevaluate where we are and regroup and come at this a different way. Maybe we need to abandon our air-to-ground role and go into a more defensive aspect and just make sure that we can hold our ground or protect assets or whatever it is. So there's a lot of different things you can do with mission building, and it's really only limited by the creativity and the ideas from the mission makers. And obviously those that fly it then add a whole nother level of unpredictability, right?
Right. Yes. Yeah. Well, so you reminded me of something on both those. You mentioned that you have an objective, and you also mentioned that the people involved, bring what they bring. And I know that one thing that on missions we've flown together in the past, have seen is, so we fly a bunch of missions together and a pattern emerges. Maybe it's, we're really seeing people are chasing bandits, right? They're 20, 40, 50, 60 miles from the package they're supposed to be escorting. Yep. They're not in a good position. So then I would see someone like you say, well, let's have a mission where if you do that, right, like a situation is going to arise where you're going to be tempted to do that. And if you do that, things will definitely fall apart. So right. I wonder if you could talk. Let's maybe just take that as a particular example. Let's say that at the 440th, we've seen in the last 5 or 6 flights that some people have been succumbing to the very natural urge to go chase the bandit that's 60 miles away and not necessarily a primary threat, and left the strike package unescorted, how would you maybe think about setting up a mission that would allow us to address that?
Sure.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly. Those bandits could be designed to come within 40 to 60 miles of the flight and then turn around. And if I was being particularly nasty that day, I would ensure that those bandits were potentially, high value targets, but completely unarmed, lacking fuel. All of that, of course, would be unknown to those flying the mission, but really they posed no threat. And if they got sucked into going after them, my goal there would be to find a spot just a little bit further down the flight path while they would be off chasing those bandits, try and time it in such a way that the moment they turn their back to go chasing down those what they thought were high value targets, somewhere along the line you'd have low value targets or potentially low threat targets like MiG-21s or something like that, launching right along the flight path in front of the flight. And now you've got your back to them, or potentially you've got targets coming in from the opposite direction. That was the real threat, and try and time things in a way where if you had kind of abandoned your role, as Tyrant said, to go off and hunt down that elusive prey, that might be better to talk about in a bar story. That wow, I shot down 4 MiG-29s, even though they weren't really a threat. But over, coming out of the other direction, you've got the real threat, a pair of MiG-21s loaded up with every weapon they can carry, and are coming directly after our, let's say, our transport aircraft that we're supposed to be escorting, right? And you end up losing the transport because you had your back turned and didn't see the other threat coming in from the other direction.
Yeah, and I think that really kind of illuminates the focus that we have at the 440th, which, as you've said very well, is the cooperative aspect, the mission focus, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like for us, like that mission would be about, well, hopefully succeeding, but if not, then coming back afterwards and saying, well, yeah, you got 6 kills, but the transport got shot down, or the strike flight had to jettison weapons or whatever. That's a mission fail. That's actually, I think, something that when you, Dirk, and I first got together and said, hey, maybe making a wing would be a thing we'd like to do, that was actually a big deal for us, was to put that front and center, that whole mission focus. And people have heard us talk about that already, but I think it bears repeating.
And I think you're right. I think it then hopefully would, should people get suckered into that within the actual flight, you touched upon the debrief, right? And that's one of the things that we really strive for, is to get open and constructive feedback during our debriefs. Let's face it, there's something to be learned by every flight, whether it was a success or a failure. And in this case, if you did have your 4-ship escort, go attack the other things and end up losing the transport, one of the things I would hope that would come up would be, at a minimum, a discussion of, hey, why did you leave? And could there have been a better tactic? Did you need to take the entire escort, or could you have peeled off with 2 to investigate and see that, hey, I'm now 10 miles away from the flight, and I see that what I perceived as the threat is now turning away, giving you time to come back. Or if it truly is pressing in on you, you can call for the second pair to back you up. That's that 10-mile, 20-mile gap is a good target to reach for. Meanwhile, the other element of your escort could be doing its role and scanning for targets coming from the other direction. And if they see something, potentially call you back. Again, it's that discussion about, are there better tactics, and are there things that we could have done? What did we learn from this?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So I heard you, that's good stuff. I heard you talk about, that you would try to design the mission in such a way that certain things would happen. And you mentioned, for example, getting MiG-21s to take off as people are crossing the line, getting sort of bandits to sort of tease the flight, that type of thing. Maybe it would make sense to dive into some specifics, because I know that one of the things I see with new guys when they come in is they're a little intimidated by mission building, right? Like, it's like, oh my gosh, there's a lot of buttons and I don't know how to make this work. So I wonder if you could talk, and maybe even specifically to those two things, about how to it, because I know, like, you know, it would take us longer than I think people would want to listen to us to go into everything that you know about mission building. But I do think that there's a couple things we could mention that are specifics, techniques that you've seen. Like what? So I'm a new mission builder and I want to do that. I'm like, Zeus, I really want to have a MiG-21 take off, you know, kind of as the strike package is getting within danger range. How do I do that?
So there's definitely some limitations within the BMS environment. You can't set triggers or things like that. So you are limited somewhat by the capabilities within the sim itself. But there are other things you can do as mission builders to sort of at least ensure a high probability that things will go the way you want. So in a situation where we just described, where I'm saying, hey, wow, we've got an escort potentially leaving their responsibility and heading off in one direction, I would typically try to time that so that the flight would be making a turn in their flight path, and start to increase the rate at which, let's say you're flying north, and I would try to time it in such a way, and as part of the briefing material, say that, you know, put some arbitrary mission criteria that HQ has said we are not allowed to proceed beyond this point until such and such a time. And so, you know, emphasize hey, look, you've got to be at this particular point in your flight path at this time. Meanwhile, that's setting you up for sort of a potential failure by, at that same time, now coming in from the east, having this possible threat that is never going to get closer than 40 miles away, come in at roughly that same time. Meanwhile, have the flight that's supposed to be escorted turn to the northwest, right? And it starts to create separation very quickly if you fall for it. Then, obviously you can focus in on a takeoff time for an enemy flight. And again, if you've built in this arbitrary mission criteria to cross a line at a certain time, getting aircraft to take off at specific times, relatively easy. The other thing you can do is, especially if you've got your enemy AI set to an ace or veteran level, they tend to hold their flight times fairly well. And so if you set a specific and lock in a specific time on station, you can get them to appear within weapons range or threat range at a particular time, and you can play with those values. And I can't overemphasize enough the need to run through those in the 2D map as you're building it, and just see if the planes are showing up on the map at roughly the right times, but also can't overemphasize enough the fact that there is still some randomness as designed within the BMS environment. And so even though you may have things timed out what you think are absolutely perfect, there's no guarantee that once you get into the multiplayer environment, it's going to work out that same way. And quite frankly, that's some of the appeal, I think, within the BMS environment.
Yeah, we've certainly had missions be both easier and much harder than we were anticipating.
Absolutely.
But I think, that's okay, because I think there's a lot to be said, especially I think for the way we fly, for just going up and executing something. Because, if you add in, let's say you get, 8 people would be a mission that we would consider sort of medium size, right? If you get 8 guys flying, just getting everybody from point A to point B in a way where you're not clogging communications, where you're, sticking to your times, where, everybody is doing what they're supposed to be doing at more or less the right time. Frankly, I mean, even after, not trivial amount of experience in BMS, I still think that's pretty challenging. Like, there's never an easy day, unless you're doing a ferry flight, I guess, but there's never an easy combat mission no matter what.
Absolutely. And then you throw in some of those other unpredictable things, the friendly side AI, right? If you want to clutter the airspace and really saturate participants' situational awareness. We've talked about, like I said, having a fake enemy coming in from the east and the real threat coming in from the northwest. Now throw in a couple of friendly CAS flights working the area, or strike flight returning from its mission, suddenly bearing down on you and having to declare all those targets. I mean, as a mission builder, you can really have a lot of fun and screw with people's minds, and make them work a lot harder and ratchet the situation up or down, depending on what you're trying to accomplish.
Totally. So, yeah, that's really good stuff. I love that. So I think maybe it might make sense to look, because I mean, what you're talking about there would be relatively advanced. Like, if you want to have that much stuff going on, that's a reasonably advanced mission building situation. And I would like to maybe talk a little bit about what I consider to be the other end of mission building, because I've run missions for, I mean, I know you have too, for like 12 or more pilots where the level of prep was far lower, right? And Absolutely. I think, in my opinion, the key to that is the dynamic campaign engine. Like, I think that is just such a huge asset of BMS, really, is this ability to have an entire war and then pick out missions. And I know that you and I have both run pretty long running, like hundreds of missions in each case, I think, of campaign missions that we've flown over. I think your last Friday night mission concluded after a year and a half, I think.
Something like that, yeah.
Something like that, right?
It took us a year and a half of flying every Friday night to ultimately win the campaign, but it was a lot of fun.
It was a lot of fun. I love that continuity. I mean, I think there's absolutely a place for the TEs, the custom built missions, totally, and actually campaigns can be a great backdrop for what you were talking about earlier, where you'd say, okay, I have a specific objective in mind, but I'm going to set it in a campaign world so that I have a lot of other activity that I didn't necessarily have to think about.
Cuts down on the workload, absolutely.
It does. But what I want to talk about is I'm a new mission builder. I think a great way for people to get started is to do the kind of thing I did when I was getting started, which was, I'm just going to fire up, KTO and pick the sort of middle campaign where everything sort of starts, it's not too far to the north, it's not too far to the exactly. Run it for a few hours, save it, and then what? I guess that's like, I think that's a good place to get started, but what I want to do is throw it to you and say, okay, now here you are, you're a new mission builder, you've got, a bunch of people that you want to fly with. What do I do? What do I do with this campaign that I've got sitting there to get it to the point where people can jump in and have fun together accomplishing a mission?
I think that's a great way to start, and because it does, especially after letting it just run a couple of hours, you've got ground movement, you've got enemy air activity, you've got friendly air activity, all going on. And now, where I would start is, okay, where do you, as the mission builder, what are you trying to accomplish? Where do you want to go? And so for me, it would start with quickly scanning the situation. So pulling up either BMS and just getting to the 2D screen, although within there you're going to be limited depending on what you have for settings, whether you've got the what's the term I'm looking for? The fog of war, thank you. If you've got that turned on, you may not see everything that's going on, which
maybe is okay, right?
Which is right, good. But if you're looking for a spot to, let's say, go and do a CAS mission or some sort of strategic strike, you may need to open up Mission Commander and open it up and just kind of survey the battlefield and say, this is the sweet target that I'm looking for. Maybe it's an air base that's really active. Maybe it's like I say, a huge column of enemy armor. But whatever it is, either using Mission Commander or even just the built-in 2D screen in the campaign, look around the theater and pick something that you think would make an appropriate target. Or if you're not necessarily looking for specific targets to go strike, look for targets maybe that you're looking to defend. Hey, I've got a friendly column that is moving forward, or I've got a friendly asset that needs to be protected. Maybe it's an airbase, maybe it's an AWACS or tanker that's on station. How do I protect that? And then from there, this is where I think the tool that you built, Tyrant, the VMT, really comes in handy, because using that tool, you can load the campaign and quickly look at all of the flights that are going on both sides of the war. And that's something you can't do within the BMS engine unless you actually are joining on the other side. And so you can flip back and forth from between sides, but it's a bit of a pain to do, whereas the virtual mission tools allows you to load up a campaign, see all of the various countries flying, see all of their flights, and if let's take an example, let's make it an easy one. I've decided I want to go strike a nuclear power plant, and first thing I would do is make sure that there aren't any other friendly flights going to strike that, right? If this is something I want us as a wing to accomplish, I would try to make sure that I don't get any more help from other blue side AI than I really want. Maybe I do want the seed flight to go in ahead of us. Maybe not. But I'd look for things within the tool, and then using Mission Commander, potentially delete some flights or change their takeoff times so that it creates a pocket for me to insert my flight and accomplish the things that I want to do. That may include tasking a seed flight to ensure that SAMs are taken out around the area or clear a path that gets me up there. More than likely, I'll need an escort flight. Again, this is where having a tool like VMT lets me quickly look around and see that, oh wow, there's going to be a lot of red air. You know what? I'm gonna task a couple of escort flights. Or, you know what? Maybe I know that there's a lot of guys that aren't going to be around this weekend, and I'm not going to have that many people, so maybe I need to delete a red flight or two to just make it a little bit more achievable with a fewer number of escort pilots. Then again, I guess the flip side to that, and I'm going to try not to get us too far down a rabbit hole, but maybe the flip side of that is that this becomes one of those situational awareness type flights. Does the flight recognize that they're pushing into enemy territory and they're heavily outgunned despite the briefing? Or maybe the briefing is, hey, expect heavy red air, and the escort flights will be responsible for communicating to the strike flight that whether the path is clear or not, and this may be a mission abort before it even gets started. So that starts to give you lots of different options. And then, again, it's finding yourself a flight path that you think is going to make it achievable. Again, depending on some of the skills that you are looking to test and exercise within the mission. It might be a high-level path. It might be a low-level ingress. Start there and lay out, I'd say if it's going to be a strike, lay out your strike flight first, so that you've got a path that's there. Maybe even fly it, save your progress, fly it once on your own, see if it looks like it's something that can be done. Obviously that can be a little tricky if first you have to take out surface-to-air missiles or things like that, but there's a lot of different ways to try and accomplish that. And then slowly add in the other flights for the package, layer it up so that you get the mission that you're looking for with the appropriate level of enemy resistance that you're looking for. And again, have to emphasize that no matter what you do in single player, expect something to change when you get to multiplayer. BMS absolutely acts differently between single player and multiplayer, and there are different reactions that the enemy has. And again, that's part of the I think the enjoyment, because even as a mission builder, I may think I know what's going to happen, but I don't, especially in a dynamic campaign in multiplayer.
Yeah, and that's a great point. And I think it kind of leads to another thing I want to say, which is, if you're doing this for the first time, I love your example. Frag out a nuke strike, and let's say you've got 6 people. Maybe two seed, 2 escort, 2 strike. Right. Yep. That's a great mix. And then I think this is the key part. Go ahead and fly it, and a perfectly acceptable result is we couldn't get to the target. We turned around and we brought everybody home. Right?
Absolutely.
Right. That's like, I think that's a thing that is so, that I think, I don't know about you, but it took me a long time to learn that. I mean, not that you want to jettison weapons at the first sign of trouble or anything like that, but like to start to develop that feel for, when is it good to press and when is it not good to press. And if you're a first time mission builder, you're not going to do a perfect job. That's okay. There's absolutely correct execution of a mission that was not possible to complete. Right. And I think it's important to remember that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, thinking back on some of the missions I've created and we've flown over the years, some of the best feedback that I've received from those that have flown missions are on missions that we didn't complete or weren't able to complete successfully. And the reaction is typically, wow, you know what? I bet if we tried something different, a different tactic, can we refly this mission in a couple of weeks so that we can try different tactics and different things? And it's because of that randomness within BMS, it's never quite the same mission. Right. And so you're able to go back and try different tactics without it being just the same cookie cutter. I mean, sure, the briefing's going to be the same. Your takeoff times are going to be the same. A lot of the aspects will be the same. But it gives you the opportunity to try different things and see how it changes the scenario and the outcome. And it's a lot of fun. And it's, some guys may look at that as, well, if you fly the same mission over and over again, that's kind of cheating because you know what's going to happen. I disagree. I think it's a great opportunity to learn and try different things. It's not like we're not getting graded on this. There's no prizes being handed out. So go ahead and try different things, learn from that experience, and now the next time you have a mission and you're in a similar situation, hopefully that training, like you just described it, will kick in and you go, hey, wait a minute. We've done this before in a different mission. We need to change our tactics. Here's what's worked for us best. And you're able to have that in-flight conversation and discussion, either in flight or maybe it's briefed ahead of time that, hey, this smells like a trap. Let's be prepared to execute plan B in the air if we need to.
Absolutely. Yeah. I'm thinking of
lots of fun things.
Absolutely. And I'm thinking too of that, like we mentioned reflies, which I love reflies. I always want to do the same thing and see if I could do it better. But we've actually done a couple different forms of the refly. Certainly we've taken and flown the same. I mean, I say the same mission. Sometimes there'll be minor tweaks, like, the SAM defenses were ridiculous. Like this needs to be toned down slightly, but it's the same overall mission. But another thing that we've done, and I'm thinking in particular of one series of flights that you and I did, if you remember the Mavericks against the Hawks, right? You know what I'm talking about, right?
Yeah.
Anyway,
I knew you were going there,
right? Because like there's especially in the campaign setting, because it evolves and it doesn't require as much work by the mission creator. You can say, well, we didn't hit the target or achieve the objective that time. We're going to go after it again. It's an important target. I mean, there's alluding to this
Much
one.
Like you would do in real world, right?
Exactly, right. We didn't get it. I mean, and hopefully, you didn't get shot down, but turned back or weren't able to achieve it without loss. But, maybe there were losses. You go and try it again, right? And I think that is, I mean, we did an ITO campaign. And I think you definitely flew these where we were going after the SA-17s, and we were flying strictly with without harms, because we were flying strictly on the Israeli, like we didn't add any NATO forces in. We were flying the Israeli aircraft, and we also limited ourselves to not flying the even the more advanced ones. And so we had to hit these things with what we had, and I mean it took us 5-10 missions before we finally worked out how you could take out an SA-17.
Absolutely.
With that stuff.
you had to develop tactics on the fly, so to speak, and over a period of time. And it's how do you penetrate this defense, given the fact that it's much superior to the weapons that you're employing. And so, how do you use that knowledge and find the weakness, because there's almost always a weakness somewhere that you can exploit. And it's, as a mission builder, I love to try and set up scenarios like that really challenge them and set things like you just described it. Hey, you don't have, 20-mile JDAM type weapons that you can launch from a safe standoff, or go back to old school. It's just slick iron bombs because some quartermaster screwed up somewhere and you don't have those available to your flight today, right? Create whatever backstory you want and really challenge the flight to do things. I mean, dropping standoff weapons from 30,000 feet, that just kind of gets old after a while. So having that mix, and like you said, whether it be in a campaign or a TE that's specifically created to test that, is a lot of fun. And that's part of why we get together at the 440th.
Absolutely.
It's working with others to try different ideas, and not all of them will work out as well as you thought or as well as you think, but that's part of the fun and the learning process.
If you're not making mistakes, you're not learning anything.
Exactly.
And to be clear, we're not at all opposed to JDAM. We're not a 80s theater only type of wing for sure.
No.
We probably would not drop JDAM against. We probably wouldn't frag a mission unless it was maybe in the late stages of a campaign that we were interested in finishing in a certain way. We probably wouldn't drop JDAM against a completely grounded enemy force where we'd taken out all of the significant SAMs and all that good stuff. That's just not as challenging, right? We would be more interested in a one where, you're flying JDAM because there's a whole red wall of MiG-29s coming down and the escort's opened a window and you've got to drop precisely within this 30-second slot because that's all the more time you've got before they're on you, that type of thing.
Exactly. Try to make the weapon fit the scenario.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Cool. Such good stuff. We've had some really good missions together, I will say, too, and I'm looking forward to more.
Absolutely. Yep.
Yeah, so I don't want to cut you off. I mean, I think
those are the big points, right? I think we could go on for hours talking about this, and I'm sure we'll have additional podcasts in the future, but I'd say the big thing is, for those that haven't done any mission building, try it. Get out there, start small, play around with the mission editor within BMS, go grab Mission Commander and Tyrant's virtual mission tools applications, and play around, see what you see, and it'll give you ideas. There's lots of tricks we can talk about on how to hide surface-to-air missile sites and how to bring up some surprises within missions. Certainly the fog of war is one way to do that, but there's other tricks that we can do, and we can dedicate whole podcasts to that. But if all else fails, come check us out at the 440th. Totally. And get in on a flight or two and see the type of flights that we fly and see if it's something that might pique your interest as well.
Absolutely. I mean, we're more than happy to share this information here on the podcast. We are more than happy to have the discussion at the 440th, www.440thvfw.com. Whether or not you decide to join us, we would love to have you come by to talk this stuff. Or maybe
Absolutely.
We'll see you on the BMS forums, but we're more likely to be hanging out at our neck of the woods. So you should totally come by and we'd love to teach you this stuff. So like you say, there's more we could say, but we probably should cut it off before, because I'm sure I always said a good podcast is one where somebody has driven home, like they put the podcast on when they left work, and their wife or significant other is wondering why they're still sitting in the driveway, right? But I don't want to keep people from their dinner. Hopefully,
you don't want them to fall asleep in the car.
No,
either.
that would be worse. That would be worse.
No.
Yeah, exactly. But before we go, I do want to do. I had an idea for a segment that we thought sounded like fun, which we've sort of jokingly entitled "So There I Was," right? Like I think people kind of get the idea of that. And yeah, and so we want to do an episode on IQT. That's our initial qualification training program we talked about on the Hello World episode. It's kind of our it's how we bring people into the wing and make sure that they have all the skills that they're going to need. We teach them the skills that they're going to need to fly successfully with the wing. It's a series of 6 missions and associated discussion with an instructor pilot, and some studying as well that we ask you to do. And IQT3 is sort of the focal point of the air-to-air portion of it. And I mentioned before, Zeus, that you and I, you were my instructor pilot. You took me through IQT. It was a great experience, loved it. But we had a rather interesting first go at IQT3, and I don't know which side is more amusing to tell on this one, yours or mine. They both kind of have good elements. Maybe I'll start.
Sure.
So there I was, right? We were in a furball, and the point of IQT3 is to practice communications during a within visual range fight. And so we're calling things like, 2 is left-hand turn, 7,000, engage 1 time, MiG-21, things like that. We teach you all the communications that you need to use to coordinate successfully in a fight like that. Well, I went tumbleweed. I had no idea what was going on, and all of a sudden, a shape, which I thought was a MiG-21, flashed across my canopy. I mean, close, like within 1,000 feet. And, I just instinctively pulled on the trigger, right? Because I happened to be pulling lead. This thing flies up through my gun sight. Pull the trigger. Bullets shoot out. Immediately hear on the radio, check fire, and of course it's Zeus's voice, right? Because we're the only 2 humans in the world. And I shot at my instructor pilot during IQT3. So there's more to the story though, but I think maybe it would be a good time for the perspective switch over to your side of things. Zeus, go ahead.
Absolutely. Well, IQT3, the WVR or dogfighting flight is one of those that instructors both love and fear because they're just a lot of fun to fly, but B, it's a lot of close, fast action. I mean, it's a knife fight, and you can get hurt in a knife fight. So you certainly weren't the first, nor were you the last to have shot at their instructor pilot, and it was definitely one of those things. I can't remember exactly the circumstances or the merge aspect, but we did merge with the Bandit, and this goes back, I believe, to 433, maybe update 1, or maybe even 432. I'm not sure, where the MiGs behaved very differently than they do in the current release, which is 433 update 5. You could draw the MiGs into a circle fight, and as an IP, we would tend to essentially just act as bait. If the merge didn't happen quite right and the cadet wasn't able to immediately shoot down the MiG on the merge or catch him when he had his back turned, the instructor pilots would essentially get themselves into a defensive position and just fly just good enough so that the MiG would chase but not quite be able to engage and get their guns within the correct parameters. That's all changed because the MiGs are much more ferocious now. But anyway, on that particular flight, I do remember I was just sort of leading a MiG around and trying to announce my position, as Tyrant mentioned, calling out that I'm in a right-hand descending turn out of 10,000 feet, defensive 1 time, MiG-21, and just kind of calling out my position and looking back and seeing that I was in a roughly neutral position, I believe, with the MiG, and all of a sudden saw some tracers go by my canopy and turned around and saw this F-16 coming into position. We happened to fly at that time. We were flying, I think, with at least on my side, I had a skins on the aircraft that had a red tail on the cadets' aircraft. And mine, so that it was easy to spot us within a furball.
Easy for some people.
Hopefully easier to spot. And I recognized this F-16 behind me right about the time I heard the shots connect with the aircraft. And Tyrant always describes it as sounds like a fairly calm voice saying, check fire, check fire. I'm not sure if I was that calm.
It was assertive, certainly. I mean, you were pretty clear about what you expected me to do.
Don't kill me.
Yeah, please stop shooting now.
Right. Yeah, we were able to, I believe, quickly dispense with the 21. I don't know if he suddenly appeared within your sights or what it was, but I think we managed to dispense with the 21.
Oh, Zeus, I'm almost positive that I was too terrified to pull the trigger for the rest of that mission. Like, I'm 10 feet away. I'm pretty sure it's a MiG-21. I'm not going to shoot, though. Anyway, go ahead.
We did eventually get ourselves limp our birds back home, and
but that's where the story picks back up, right? Because we're coming off of this engagement, and
that's right.
Right, and you said say fuel, and I said 0.8, and if you're not familiar, that means I had 800 pounds of fuel remaining. And you said...
Well, I quickly asked for clarification on that because I distinctly remember setting a minimum fuel or bingo amount of something like 4,000 pounds, and I hadn't heard a bingo call.
No, I probably didn't call that, yeah.
I was sure he meant that he had,
800,
maybe, 6.8, and I just missed the first
right.
part of the call, but...
Nope.
No, it was quickly clarified that, yes, it was just 800 pounds remaining while we were... I don't know, probably 120 miles away from our home base.
Sounds
so we quickly improvised, looked up our alternate, and
so I redeemed myself a little bit. I redeemed myself. I did because we both.
How
I think
did we do that.
Well, a little bit. I mean, a little bit. I'm sure I've been court-martialed in the real world, but in terms of like the cool factor, I actually pulled off a for real, not simulated, flame-out landing after that. You also had to land an aircraft that was not fully operational because
I think I lost most of my avionics by that time. Yep.
Exactly.
But it was fun to. I think you actually led us back to the base because you had functioning avionics, but we're low on fuel. So I just stayed kind of high and out of your way and confirmed visually.
And you give me too much credit. I think we looked out the window and said, "Hey, look, there's Seosan. Let's get on the ground."
But it was good, and like you said, you were able to execute quite well a real flame out, and that was something that we simulated a little bit later, or we had planned to simulate a little bit later in IQT. So we got to check that one off right away.
We did.
And I recovered safely as well, and I think we both kind of just rolled off the end of the runway, and we're glad to turn the keys back over to the crew chief and call that flight done.
Absolutely.
But it was a lot of fun.
It was a lot of fun, and those are the ones you remember. And
it is.
And to be clear, we did fly IQT3 again. I mean, that was actually one. I think important thing about IQT is if you don't achieve the objective, then we were talking about this, right? Like we debrief. Here's what we did wrong. I went off and practiced. We came back, and I don't remember the next one, so it must have gone really smoothly because obviously I remember the one that didn't, right? So.
Right, and that's typically what happens: is you go out, you practice a few things. Once you've seen it and you've been engaged in it, it usually just takes another go around, and guys will go through it and just absolutely obliterate the enemy, not because they knew where to expect them, but simply because the task saturation doesn't happen. Mm-hmm. They've been through it once, and your brain has started to adjust that, okay, this does happen, and I can talk and fly and do math in my head while looking out the window all at the same time.
Which seems impossible when you start, but then you do it. Yep, totally.
Yep, exactly.
Awesome. Yep. So there we were.
We'll have to do more of these because I've got a few of them, including I think a visual in my mind of an AIM-9 coming straight at me through my canopy from a different flight. So there's some good stories out there.
Oh yeah, I can think of a bunch just from the flights where you and I were wingmen, let alone all of the other the guys we've flown with.
Absolutely.
Cool.
Yep.
All right. Well, I think that's an awesome place to wrap it up, having aired my dirty laundry, but I don't mind. It was a good story. Good stories are like that.
I'm sure mine will get out there as well.
I can think of one, but I won't tell it right now.
All right, we'll save that one.
Yeah, totally. Awesome. Well, Zeus, thanks so much for taking the time to come on and talk. It was super useful. I mean, I know there's a lot more we could say, but I hope that people will find that useful. Like we said, if you want to know more, if you're interested in coming to fly with us, whether that's just to sort of meet us and do a kind of a get-to-know-us flight, or to come by the forum and say hi or ask questions about anything you've heard or about joining the wing, we're at www.440th VFW. That's the number 4, the number 0, THVFW.com. I'm sure you all know how to use the search engine to find us in any event, but I'll still spell it out. We would love to see you. We would love it if you join us. We're definitely looking for people to come fly with us. But whether or not you actually decide to do that, we'd still love to meet you. So hopefully we'll see you online. Yeah, I think we'll wrap it up there. So thanks again, Zeus, and thanks everybody for listening. This has been the 440th VFW Podcast.
Thanks, everybody.